Hello and welcome to What's on My Mind with Fiona. I'm your host, Fiona Kane. The first thing I wanted to talk about today is equity versus equality. I've seen it a lot in the last few years. People have started changing. They're not using the word equality, they're using the word equity. And I think it's really important to point this out. It was actually I think it might have been maybe not this year, but last year for International Women's Day, it was all about equity. And I have a real problem with that. And I think that what I noticed is on the day when I was talking to people about it is they didn't know there was a difference. They've kind of just transplanted one word for the other. Language matters. I'm always going to bring up language. So this is an issue. So when we talk about equality, we talk about, we talk about giving people equal opportunity. So equality is you give everyone the same opportunity and then they choose to do with it what they wish. Equity is quite different. Equity is equality of outcome. And I do have a problem with that because equality of outcome says it doesn't matter what you did or didn't do, you're all going to end up in the same place. And that is simply not fair. And you only have to look at how it works in countries like North Korea and countries with socialism and communism. Is it does not encourage you to work hard or to come up with great ideas and to innovate or any of those things. Because essentially, if you're being paid the same, whether or not you're digging a ditch or whether or not you're a brain surgeon, well, why go to the effort to become a brain surgeon? Why invent some new thing or create some company and create a whole bunch of jobs and innovate somewhere when you're not going to get rewarded for that, right? So it's as simply as, if someone's, of course, I believe in people being looked after. I don't believe in socialism as a whole, as a good idea for a whole way of politics. Although I do understand there's certain bits about things like socialised medicine and those things where I don't know, I can't argue the minutiae of it because I don't know the minutiae of it. But certainly the idea that certainly in Australia, we have Medicare, which taxpayers fund, but we also have private health. And I think that's a pretty good balance. It's not perfect, but I don't like the idea of people not getting care if they need it. So I do understand that that's a form of socialism. I'm okay with that to a point. What I'm not okay with is that if everyone just sat around on the dole, they would all get the same outcome as the person who's gone off and worked hard and created their own business and, or got a great job or gone to university and got a great qualification and worked their way up and spent, their whole career. And if they get the same outcome as the person who just sat around smoking joints on the couch, that's just not fair. And that's what equity is. So I have a problem with equity. Equality, yes, just trying to ensure everyone gets the same, to jump off from the same point as much as possible, because it's just we all have different lives and different backgrounds. It's almost impossible, but just trying to even things up in that way, I've got no problem with. But evening up the outcome, I've got a problem with that. Excuse me, I'll just have a drink. So yeah, equity versus equality. I really love equality. I really dislike equity when it's used in that when it's used for that purpose. There's a great quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I've probably said the name wrong, but anyway, he said, "Human beings are born with different capacities. If they are free, they are not equal, and if they are equal, they are not free." So I'll just say that again. Human beings are born with different capacities. If they are free, they are not equal. And if they are equal, they are not free. And again, what he's referring to is when you look at those societies, wherever it's communism, socialism, those places like in North Korea, they are not free, but they are equal, except for the people on top who kind of are in charge. So that, there's even in socialism, there's, some people are more equal than others. So there's always a class above, whether it's socialism or whether it's capitalism, that you're going to get that. But yeah, the truth is that when you're in those situations, yeah, they are all equal. They are all equally starving in North Korea. They are all equally miserable and starving and desperate. That's what they have there. So that's when they say, what's her name now? There's the lady who escaped from North Korea. Her name's not coming to me right now. It might come to me in a moment. But she's got a great book about her escape from North Korea, and she talks about it there. And she talks about how in the beginning they say, look, if you give up your property, if you give up these things and those things, we'll just look after everybody. You won't have to worry. We'll just look after everybody. And that's how they convince people. They say, look, we'll look after all of you. Just give up everything and we'll look after all of you. And once you've given up everything, they don't look after you and you no longer have freedom. So, so if you're equal, you're not free. Now, if you're free, like I was talking about before, when I was talking about equity versus equality, if you're free, then you are free to make something of yourself or you are free not to, right? So you are free to sit on the lounge and not do anything and not achieve anything in your life, or you're free to innovate and come up with a business or get a job, work hard, whatever it is, right? So it's freedom means that there's different outcomes because we have free choice, right? To a certain degree. We can make certain decisions about our life and certain decisions about how hard we will work on things, how we will go about things, whether or not we take up opportunities or not, those kinds of things. And I know that there's also, the truth is that we are just not equal because there are great singers. I'm not one of them. There are people who are tall. I'm not one of those. There are people who are models. I'll never be one of those, right? There are people who are great at sports. I'm not going to be one of those people either. Brain surgeon? No, I will never be a brain surgeon. Truck driver? Nope, never going to drive a truck. There's a million things that I can't do based on my ability to learn, the way that my brain works. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Having a bit of a coughing fit, so I thought I'd put it on hold for a moment. Yeah, there's just a million things that I will never do, and I just have to accept I will never do those things because I am not physically, emotionally, financially, or brainy enough, or whatever it is. Right? There's just things I will never do, and there's things I can do and that I can do well that other people can't do or can't do as well or won't get the opportunity or whatever it is. It's as simple as that, right? Life is unfair and we do have different skills, we do have different abilities, but that's also what makes it interesting. It's not all the same, and that's actually what makes it great as well, because it actually means that we can do different things and we can excel in different things, right? So we don't all have to be the same. Someone can excel in singing or playing the guitar or running or creating businesses, being an entrepreneur or whatever it is, but people can excel in whatever it is they excel in, or they might excel in being a carer or being a nurse, being a doctor, being a good friend, being lots of things, right? So there's different things that people excel in. They might write well, whatever it is. And that's a good thing. So we don't want to be completely equal in that way. Equal as in being treated equally and giving equal opportunity in those things, but not equal as in we're all exactly the same. It just doesn't work that way. We're not. Where human beings are very different and the way we behave is very different. So I just wanted to clarify that in regards to sort of equity and equality. Equity, no. Equality, yes. And we have to be careful of language, and we don't want to be completely equal because we're not completely equal, because it's just is, there's people who are born sort of 7 foot tall, they make great basketballers. I'm 5 foot tall. I don't, right? And I can complain to my heart's content, but it is what it is. We're not equal. I won't be able to do basketball like they can. And, good on them. They've got that skill. Maybe they're not as good as some of the things I can do, right? Simple as that, right? So sometimes we just got to get over it and move on. I'll be back in a moment with my next segment. Hi, it's me again. I have a couple more quotes actually from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I said I was going to be moving on, but just not for a moment. He was actually a Russian author, but there's a couple of other quotes I have here that I just think are great. So one is, socialism of any type and shade leads to a total destruction of the human spirit and to a leveling of mankind into death. And I agree with that. And if you read, I remember the name of that author, that lady from North Korea. Her name is Yeonmi Park. So it's Yeonmi, Yeonmi Park. And her book is great. So please, I think she's got maybe 2 books now. But anyway, her stuff, I think I read both of them. They're very good. And she talks about that, what it does to the human spirit. So and it's interesting because when she does in that book, she talks about the language in North Korea. And there's a lot of words they don't have. They just don't have language for a lot of words. A lot of words to do with feelings, because your feelings absolutely do not matter in North Korea. So there's a lot of words like love and feeling type words that they just actually, that words don't exist. So it's interesting to read Yeonmi Park's book. But he's absolutely right there when he says that. The other one is a decline in courage may be the most striking feature which an outside observer notices in the West in our days. And it's absolutely true, there is a declining in courage. I think that we've been comfortable for so long in the West. We've forgotten where we came from. We've forgotten the people who fought and died for us, and fought and were sort of damaged and emotionally and physically damaged for us, and families that were destroyed, and all of that sort of happened in the West throughout the years. And now we're having this rise again with all of these intellectuals in universities thinking it's a good idea for us to move to communism, and it's just so not. But we've got such a distance now from our world wars and from some of the achievements that we made last century, that I think that we don't understand. A lot of people do not understand what is going on in the world right now. And people aren't being brave at the moment. And, the interesting thing is that, being brave at the moment is just things like standing up for women's rights. Who would have thought? I mean, it was brave in the 60s, and now all of a sudden it's brave again because you're not allowed to stand up for women's rights. And I've really noticed that this week, because I think last week I talked to you about how I got into a little bit of a Facebook spat on my private Facebook, and I had 2 individuals who were sort of going after me quite personally. They just couldn't stick with the topic, and they were going after me quite personally. And but the topic was in regards to sports and in regards to biological men who are invading women's sports, whatever they like to call themselves, biological men. And what happened is there's 2 individuals that just couldn't stay on the topic. They just had to attack me personally. I made it quite clear that I do not engage on personal attacks, happy to engage on the topic, but not on personal attacks. So I said that to these people, and but one of them in particular was very nasty. And ultimately, with both of them, I blocked them. I unfriended them and blocked them. And then one of them during this week, he's actually now come after me, found my Instagram, started making comments and attacking me on Instagram, just going through my posts and sort of saying random things, calling me random names and all this sort of stuff. And then I didn't respond to those. And then he sent me a personal message, and he's attacking me in his personal message. You didn't respond to me. You don't have the guts to respond to me, blah, blah, blah. And really kind of yelling at me for not responding to him. And I only said one comment to him. It's the only thing I've said this whole way through. I just said, I told you from the beginning, I don't respond to anyone who does personal attacks. I'm happy to discuss the topic, but not someone who personally attacks me. So please leave me alone. And then he just kept responding really angrily. So guess what? He got booted from there as well. So I'm sure I'll see him pop up in other places. I hope not, but he probably will. But it's quite interesting because in the original post where we were discussing it, I pointed out that misogyny has never been more present than it is now in this issue of women's rights in regards to the trans situation, and he proved it. Right? He proved it because he came after me, and it was really he was like, "How dare you unfriend?" Like, he was so upset that I unfriended him, and he didn't get to come and finish just writing me off and destroying me, and he was threatening my career, and he was going to tell people about me and this and that, and I was like, wow, okay. Anyway, I'm living rent-free in his head just because we have a different opinion. And that's what the point of last week's episode was, to talk about how to have discussions and be okay with the fact that someone's got a different opinion to you. Like I've said, and I will say all along, I don't pretend I'm always right, and sometimes I learn things and I change my point of view. I'm open to discussions and learning, but once you start being abusive towards me, I'm not interested in a conversation. I just will not. Don't like if someone's abusive towards you, they don't. They're not coming from it in any sort of goodwill way, and they're not interested in having a reasonable discussion. They're just an angry troll, and angry trolls. Yep, I don't have time for them. They're just not on my agenda. Someone with a reasonable discussion, yes. Angry troll, no. Anyway, I will just move on to the next part as well. But again, I'll be back in a moment. Continuing on, the other thing that is on my mind this week is again on the theme of women's rights. Is that the issue that we're having now? There's so many issues here, but the issue that we're having is that some of the most at risk people are actually women with disabilities, because what's happening now is that because people can just say whatever sex they are in a lot of places, they can just say, "Oh, I could just say I'm a man," or a man could just say he's a woman. What happens is if you are getting some sort of carer or nurse to come and see you, so this happens in hospitals, but it can also happen if you're getting a carer, say, sent to your home to shower you and do personal, private things like that with you. As a woman, you can't actually say, "Look, I only want a biological woman." You can't say that. And so the risk is you could have a man show up to do that, and that may or may not be fine. Look, I'm sure many of these men are lovely people. Some of them might not be, but but the fact that you don't have a choice is a problem, because we should have a choice. We should have a choice. If I want to go to the doctors, and if I need to have a personal test or something done at the doctor's, I have a choice to book a woman doctor if I want to, because if I feel more vulnerable or a problem with being with a male doctor, I am allowed to make that choice. And so, sort of women living with disabilities who need someone to come and help them should be allowed to request a female, a biological female, if that is what they need to feel safe, regardless of the person involved, whether or not they're good person, bad person, or whatever the person who's coming out to do the support work. And the other thing too in this is, what I find is really frustrating is, and I talked about this before, I don't have an issue with people being who they are and living their best life and minding their own business and getting on with it. And that in general is what most people wanted up until sort of 5 minutes ago. But now we've got this trans ideology that has become a cult, and we've got these ideologues and activists involved, not the average person, the ideologues and activists. And these people now, and they've turned it around, because they've turned it around from being people who might have some sort of it used to be gender. I think was called dysphoria. There's dysmorphia and dysphoria. I get a bit confused between the two, but anyway, someone who feels uncomfortable in their body, and it used to actually have. Be the DSM and be a mental health issue, because it is a mental health issue. The same as if you think that anorexia, right? You think that you're fat when you're actually skinny, or people now who identify as someone who is disabled and they want to get their arms chopped off or the legs chopped off, right? All of these things are actual mental health issues. If you can't see how your body is and you think that it's the wrong body, that kind of thing, in most cases, this is actually, if not all, it is a mental health issue. But what they've done is they've actually turned it into a social justice issue. So instead of being a person's personal mental health issue that they definitely need empathy and support and all the love and care, it's been turned into a social justice issue and a political issue. And instead of being a mental health issue now, because it's a social justice issue, it's they're sort of talking about there's a trans genocide. Anyone who, like, if you just say, "Oh, that's a man," when it is, but he doesn't want to be called a man, "You're doing a trans genocide," right? That's a trans genocide. And they talk about genocide, like there's a trans people all over the streets dead, trans genocide. So it has actually become a political thing. rather than an individual thing. So it's become part of a political football and social justice issue. So now, instead of just individuals with some mental health issues that need support, it has become this sort of social justice warrior thing, and they are an oppressed people, and they need to be saved because they're being oppressed, and they're not being oppressed. Well, in the Western world, they might be being oppressed in Muslim countries and things like that, but we can't say that, and we don't talk about that. And we do. Instead, we have queers for Palestine and things like that because that makes sense. So, you know, these people are not, there's not a genocide, not for trans people, and they're not for the most part, if not totally, they're just not being oppressed in the Western world. If anything, it's the opposite, that we're actually destroying all women's rights so that we don't offend a guy that doesn't want to be called he, right? So we've got to understand that this has just been relabeled and retaken as being a personal issue to being a political issue, and therein lies the issue that I have. I don't have the issue with individuals, and I feel like individuals, this is a really difficult situation. Individuals need all the support they can get, but the support is not to say yes, you're being oppressed, and yes, you really are opposite sex and blah blah blah. The support is to help people learn how to be comfortable, live in their own bodies, and again, I I'll have to talk more about it next time. But I just was listening to I've listened to a lot of podcasts and watched a lot of podcasts with detransitioners, with people with young people who thought that they were trans and then later on have realised that they weren't. And I listened to one yesterday on the Heretics podcast with Andrew Gold. I highly recommend his podcast, and the episode from this week. And this young woman, she was convinced that she was a boy, but she wasn't. She realized that she wasn't down the track, but she sort of had already done some hormones and things like that, and she turned out to have a hormonal issue. So she wasn't kind of assessed to see, she had a hormonal issue that made her basically be like, I won't say the word, but extreme moods and wanting to kind of end things, right, when it's certain times of the month. And there was an issue with, I think, where her body didn't recognize progesterone or something, right? So she had this issue, and they were willing to, they didn't go that far, but they would have put her under the knife and the rest of it. And so we need to kind of assess what's going on for people. And she was talking about, in her experience in listening to and talking to other detransitioners, and you see it all the time when you see these interviews, is that some of these people suffer from, they're on the spectrum, the autistic spectrum, or they have some other kind of, they might have ODD or OCD, or like some other issue, mental health issue or neurodivergent issue that might be causing their discomfort. They also talk about how many people who believe this is women to men, like a woman who wants to, a woman, it's usually children, young women who want to become a man. Many of them have had some sort of sexual assault or something like that as well. Not all of them, but many. And so it's kind of like they're actually wanting to get the bits cut off that kind of remind them of what's happened to them. So we need to support these people and give them what they need, but what they need isn't to get things cut off, right? So it is a major issue that's in the name of politics. That's what's sort of happening, and these people are being harmed, and people involved. Some of the people involved are doing it out of, they believe it's compassionate. It's not compassionate to harm someone like that. It's just not. You wouldn't tell someone with anorexia that yes, you're definitely fat, you should go on a diet and you should go and get lipo and get your stomach stapled and blah blah blah. You don't say that to a girl who suddenly thinks that she should be a boy. The other thing too is that with a lot of these girls, and this is a common theme that I've seen, I think Chloe Cole was similar, she's another detransitioner. A common theme that I have seen is, and I understand this from having gone through puberty myself, right, is as a young woman, when you go from being a little girl, and when you're a little girl, people usually comment on things like, oh, you're really good at that thing, or, you're really clever at music or sport or like whatever it is, the things that you do. Oh, well done at school. You got an A in your test, whatever. So when your little people kind of notice what you do, whatever, when we get older as girls, what starts to happen is people start to notice us for what we look like. And then as soon as you pretty much start getting the curves, suddenly you will have men and grown men, like you might be still only 12, but you have a grown man on the street kind of starting to turn around, look at you and starting to notice you, and you might start getting wolf whistles, and suddenly you just get all of this attention, and not just from boys your own age, but from men. And it's very frightening. And and I'm not having a go at people or anything. I'm having a go at men. I mean, it's part of how it is. Oh, I'm having a go at men who are kind of awful and leering and whatever, but not in general, not for men for noticing women. But it's very scary, and it's very confusing, and all of a sudden people are commenting on your backside or your boobs or your hair or some other thing, and they're not talking about what you've achieved or who you are as a person. They're starting to talk about what you look like, and you're being looked at sexually and sized up sexually, and you might not even know what sex is, let alone be able to process any of that. So it is actually a very confusing time for women, and so most girls will go through a sort of dysphoria, or like a time where they feel uncomfortable in their body, and they don't want to have, they might actually start wearing like baggy t-shirts and different things, or trying to like, putting the sports bra to make sure, trying to cover up their boobs, that kind of thing. So it's not that unusual. It's not unusual for girls to go through this. But what we're doing now is we're medicalising it, and we're turning it into a condition where what they really need is just the support of how psychologically and physically to manage that change into puberty. And the cure in 99 point whatever percent of cases is puberty. When you get to the other side of it, sort of, you're okay. So anyway, they're the things that are on my mind at the moment, that there's more and more detransitioners coming out. It's really important that we listen to them, and my concern is over and over that any woman who speaks up about these issues or speaks up about the safety with men in regards to coming into our private spaces is attacked like nobody's business, really. J.K. Rowling, the witch trials of J.K. Rowling, right? She's a classic example. They're the things that are on my mind. So I just want to say that, and also too, there is a new, I'll talk about it next time, but there's some new films and new resources and things coming out to support parents in situations where your child believes that they're trans, or has been caught up in this ideology. And there's sort of new information coming out sort of every week, and educate yourself on these things, and don't get I've talked about it before, but don't get convinced to ignore your lying eyes. You know what is true and what is right, so don't let anyone convince you to not pay attention to your strong intuition. That's, when something is not right, you are usually correct in that. So don't let people sort of say because I actually, one of the people in the Facebook spat I had was, wanted to, oh, well, you probably don't realize that you're really misinformed and really stupid. You're probably not meaning to be a horrible person, so how about you go and get re-educated? And anyone who tells you have to go and get re-educated, that's the same thing that happened to Riley Gaines, the swimmer, when that 6-foot odd male swimmer came along and joined her team. It was quite interesting that that the girls who were really upset by it, what they were told to do is they were actually told that to get counselling, and the idea of the counselling was to make sure that they are re-educated to know that they shouldn't have a problem with a man being in their change room. So the counselling was re-education to accept, just do as you're told, right? Not counselling the other way. Counselling as in do as you're told, get with the program, don't believe your lying eyes. Yes, trans women are women. Yeah, no, they're not. Trans women are men. Anyway, I will leave it at that, but I'll talk to you again next time. And if you want to comment and have a conversation, I am fine with that. If you want to troll me or you just want to abuse me, I'm not going to respond to that. Anyway, have a great week, and please start having conversations with each other about these really, really important issues. We must protect our children, and we must protect our girls and our women. Okay, talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.